Hi, it's Bishop Mark. Today is Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 24. Now, as I said last time, chapter 15 is not a big chapter, but it's a beautiful chapter. It has three stories of those lost. We've heard two of them already, the lost sheep and the lost coin. And this is the lost son. Now, most people, when they refer to this parable, call it the Prodigal Son. Prodigal, prodigal son. Prodigal means someone who spends money too much. They just waste it all. That's what prodigal means. So it's the wasteful son. And he was lost because he wasn't concentrating on God. He was concentrating on himself. So let's listen to the first half of the story of the prodigal son, and we'll talk about it as we go. Here we go. Then he said, a man had two sons. And the younger son said to his father, Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me. So the father divided the property between them. Okay, so we have a story of a man who had two sons, and he had an older son and a younger son, and the younger son is not going to wait until his father dies to receive his inheritance. He wants it now. He wants it right away. And he asks for it. He's bold. And the father does it. He divides his property, and he gives his younger son the money that will come to him later on. But he gives it to him early. Okay. So the father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off to a distant country where he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. So this is why he's called the prodigal son, because he spent his money in bad things, wasteful things. Now the words they use here are squandered means wastefully spent, and a life of dissipation means just doing bad things, just not caring about anything, just spending money. So the man, the younger son, boldly asks for his inheritance, then goes off to a distant country and he wastes the money. He is very wasteful, and that's why he's called prodigal. Okay. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he found himself in dire need. So you feel sorry for him a bit. He wasted his money, but he didn't save any of it. And then a famine hit, so a lack of food. So the food became very expensive, very hard to get, and he didn't have any more money to spend. He didn't have a job. So he found himself in terrible need. So he hired himself out to one of the local citizens, who sent him to his farm to tend the swine. So he got a really low job on the totem pole. His job was to feed the pigs. That's what he did. He went from being the happy son, well, maybe not so happy, but the son of a rich man. He spent all his money, and now he's feeding the pigs. So he squandered his money. He let it go. It's all gone. Okay. And he longed to eat his fill of the pods on which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. He was so hungry that he was envious of the pig's food that he was feeding the pigs, and he wanted to eat the pig's food. That's how hungry the poor man was. Okay. Coming to his senses, he thought, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough to eat? But here am I, dying from hunger. So finally he starts thinking about his father, and he's not thinking about him in a good way. It's kind of a selfish way. His workers have more to eat than I have. I'm probably saying to himself, I was so stupid to leave my father. Why did I do that? Here I am with the pigs, hungry. And if I had stayed at home, even if I was one of his hired workers, I'd be doing better off than I'm doing now. That's what made him think again. Sometimes people in bad ways, they have to be really low before they start to climb out of it. Yeah. There are poor people in this world who suffer from all kinds of bad things like addictions and things. And sometimes they have to reach the lowest of the low. We call it rock bottom before they start thinking about changing their life. And this son, that's what happened to him. He hit the very bottom and started to think about changing his life. To change his life, he had to be humble. So this is what he did. I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers. So no one will hire him and feed him except for this awful job. And he figures, I'll go back and I'll say to my father, I've sinned against you, and I've sinned against God, because he wasted his money, he wasted his resources, he was all about himself. That's sinning against God. And he'll say to his father, treat me like your hired workers. Please hire me. I know that I can't be your son anymore and have that privileged life. Treat me like your hired person. And he's walking home and he's rehearsing his speech. Treat me like your hired workers. I no longer deserve to be called your son. And he's rehearsing this as he goes. He's ready to rehearse it, to speak to his father. So he got up and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. Now remember, this whole section is about how much God loves those who return to him. Even the hardest sinner, like this man. God loves it when we return to him. And this is a parable, tells a story about when we sin. And the Father waits for us, Jesus, God, waits for us to turn our life around. And notice what happens. He sees him from afar. The Father of the Son sees him from afar. He caught sight of him, filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. So the father has every right to wait for the speech. But he's so overjoyed that the son has returned that he doesn't wait for the son to go to him. He goes to the son, he runs to him, kisses him, embraces him. Because that's how much the Father loves it when we return back to him. That's how much God loves it when we return back to him. So the son gives his speech. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. But his father ordered his servants, quickly bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fattened calf and slaughter it. Then let us celebrate with a feast. Because the son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. Then the celebration began. So, how generous of that loving father whose son wasted all his money and now is lower than low. And he doesn't treat him like the hired worker. He treats him like his son, dresses him up. They call a feast, they would have a food ready to be prepared. They had to kill their own food, so they killed the best food, the fattened calf, and he called for a celebration because his son had returned. Such is the love of God when we return to him after sinning. Maybe we go to confession. Maybe we just turn our life around. Maybe we're finally humble. God runs to us and loves us and brings us in, doesn't wait for our excuse. He loves us. He still allows us to say our speech. But God is so happy when we return to him. It's a beautiful story. And there's a second half to it. We'll see that the next time. The story of the prodigal son. See you then.